The Accessibility Breakdown by Inclusion Impact Accessibility.
Hey, welcome to the Accessibility Breakdown. I am Mark,
And I'm
and this
Justin.
is. Are you
You
intent?
never do this is.
I always do, and this is. I have a script up here. I'm reading. All right. So I am Mark, and this is
Justin.
good. Every week, we pay tribute to those who stand out to us as leading by accessibility by picking 3 topics that strike us in some way. This week, we're going to talk about building a general purpose accessibility agent and what we learned in the process. This is by Eric Bailey, and this is essentially a new accessibility features, I guess we could say, in GitHub.
Yeah. New
Yeah,
offering.
okay. All right. And then we're going to talk about a structural workbook for AI, accessible design systems. This is by Anne E. Cook. This is interesting too. This is sort of essentially a playbook for understanding what your organization needs to consider before they start to use AI for coding
And design systems.
and design systems. And then we've got kind of a different topic here, and it's accessible medical diagnostic equipment rule to take effect this summer. And this is very much related to Title II and HHS, but it applies a little bit differently than the sort of digital accessibility that we're talking about. But there's some crossover. So there's some interesting discussion to have there. So having said all that, Justin, I'm going to count on you because a couple of these first couple of articles are pretty technical, and I'm going to need you to really break it out. So let's start with building general purpose accessibility agent and what we learned in the process. I think this is really cool. I think this is a huge step up step up in accessibility for GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
And it puts some really incredible things at people's fingertips. So tell us what this is.
Yeah. What Eric wrote about here was basically GitHub's approach to building a agentic model or structure for testing for accessibility. And it walks through kind of their initial planning stages, talks about why they decided to go with an orchestrator model using subagents, which is important. And they call out why they specifically did this. Talks about some of the things that they found in their testing. It's just a really nice overview. I wouldn't say a deep dive because there was definitely questions that I had kind of throughout. I'm like, ooh, did they do this? How did they approach that? But it gives a really nice overview of how they built what they ended up building, why they built it the way they did, some of the trade-offs, some of the things specifically that they are looking to evaluate as they continue using this new tooling. I didn't see anywhere where it has been fully launched yet, but they have done a number of different installed in a number of different repositories. They're getting a lot of feedback. They've got a good feedback model from developers that are using it. It looks to be, just a really nicely developed tool that is going to help GitHub and people that use GitHub and their tooling to be able to actually utilize agentic AI to do some accessibility testing where it makes sense is the important part.
So can you talk to just like specifically, so the article that Eric wrote, that is, it's sort of a making of, right? He talks about the process behind creating these tools. Let's take a step back and talk to me about what these tools are. So we get that it's agentic AI that can test for accessibility, but let's get into some of the details of it. Like, how does it work? What exactly can it do? Can it not do? And how would somebody really use these tools at all? I'm assuming everything's got to be in GitHub, but how would somebody use these tools um, in GitHub or outside of GitHub or whatever?
Yeah. So the way that they mention in the article that it's being integrated into GitHub, I'm assuming through Actions,
Hmm.
but also you can use it through their Copilot CLI, which is a command line interface, uh, and or VS Code, Visual Studio Code. They have a Copilot GitHub integration there as well.
Right.
So those would be some ways that you can interact with this LLM. Um, the example that they show in the article, they talk about in the article, is within pull requests. So a pull request is, I do some work, I'm done with that work, I'm now going to submit that work for inclusion in our code repository, and you, Mark, are going to be the reviewer of that code.
Hmm.
And typically that's a very manual process, and you could go through and look for all sorts of things. But one of the cool things that they've done is they have a by tying this into a GitHub action, they can actually have their accessibility LLM actually be one of those reviewers. And so
Okay.
it can look at the breadth of the code, and the action has an understanding of all the changes that were made as part of that particular pull request, but it also has access to the code. So it can look to see, hey, you've made this particular change here. I don't think this is the right thing. So you need to go and maybe update this particular CSS class, or you're going to run into a particular issue with meaningful sequence because of the way that you've changed this code in this way. So it can provide you feedback as part of the pull request that
Yeah.
you could then, the developer would then go back, fix, submit changes to their pull request, before that code ever gets merged in.
So I really one of the what I really like is the way that you phrase that, because when I was reading through this, one of my one of the things I thought is like, okay, well, doing these pull requests, you're gonna have this AI agent going in and
Mhm.
reviewing your code. The danger being that that's what people rely on. People are, I'm all set with the accessibility, right? This AI agent's reviewing it and I'm going to do everything it says and we're going to be in good shape. But you phrased it nicely because you said the
Yes.
one of the reviewers, right? And I think it's important. And anybody in accessibility knows exactly where I'm going with this, because this is the accessibility conversation, that nothing automated is going to catch all of the issues. And in the article, it's very clear about that. It's
Yes.
like, hey, this is automation. It doesn't catch everything. You've got to test your stuff. Now, whether you use AI as a step during those pull requests, so it's a shift left. This is sort of looking at the code long before it hits production, in the development process. And then you have a manual review down the road on something that's close to maybe not production, maybe it's in staging or whatever, but you have that manual process. It doesn't necessarily need to be here. This could be the only reviewer. You could add a human reviewer, but somewhere along the way, we all understand that this needs to be manually reviewed still.
Oh yeah.
But here's the thing, is that you and I both know that this is people there's always this question mark around, how do we integrate accessibility into the software development lifecycle? How do we in DevOps? How are we doing this? And this is what I like about this, is this now sort of, if you use GitHub, this is now being kind of fed to you,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's no longer a complicated integration, um, so to speak. You just have to use the tools, which I think is really cool. And particularly if that brings awareness, like, we have created this step and we're starting to understand accessibility and we're starting to fix as many issues as we can where it's inexpensive versus wait till production where it's expensive. But just by sort of GitHub serving that up and saying, we care about accessibility, here's a bunch of tools for you to use. Hopefully that also increases awareness and gets that manual check in there somewhere, and, all of that.
Well, and the thing that and the 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 tasty center at the middle of this Tootsie Roll Pop that Eric has created, that is this.
It takes 3 licks to get to
It does
that
well,
one
maybe
you
two.
talked about. 1, 2,
But
3.
but what I liked is that he talks about using an orchestrator model for the agents, and talks about how they're
Mhm.
sandboxing, and that's great. But and that's, well, I didn't mean to be dismissive about that, but the really important part is that they came to this conclusion of needing to split this up, and what they needed to do, because an LLM off the shelf, Claude Code, ChatGPT, whatever it is, they're not going to do. They're not. You can't just say, like, make sure it's accessible. You really have to handhold it. You have to put that
Wait,
thing
what? You
on.
can't do that?
You can't. I mean,
So all the time I've been just typing into AI, "Make this accessible," that's not working?
no.
Oh,
But
okay.
behind,
Thought I had it
you have to
figured
put
out.
it on guardrails. And what they've done is they have a whole repository within at GitHub
Uh-huh.
where it's the results of all their audits. And they're all contained within a repository. It's great content. It's great. It uses standardized metadata for describing things, for providing remediation values. So they use that information to help, one, train their model, but
Mhm.
two, put their agents on rails. Um, and that's really, really important. That's really cool. And that's what else, those of us that are proponents or excited about AI and agentic LLMs or agentic models, that's one of the things that we're starting to see,
Mhm.
and the power of that. So there's some really cool work that's being done kind of throughout the accessibility industry. Carl Groves has an AGP, an ARIA, uh, a set of things based around the ARIA. What's the word I'm looking for? Pattern library.
Mhm.
Um, that he wrote, that could be really interesting way to help guide an agent. Charlie Triplett has his stuff around that could be really useful in doing an agent. Um, so there's some really cool things, like ideas and things that are floating around in the accessibility space around how do we put these agents on rails so that they're not thinking for themselves and they're not
Right.
acting as a human, but how do we kind of start to play around in that space between the two?
The way I look at it is it's like people want to, present company included,
Mm,
think about AI as this anthropomorphic thing on the internet, this human-like thing on the internet, because if I grab my phone and I turn it on, or if I use it, I can talk to it like a human being, right? But what we know in the workplace is that it's a tool.
mhm,
And what I like about all of this, Carl Groves, Aria, the
mhm,
what we're talking about here inside of GitHub, is this is people going, okay, we're not dismissing AI, but we're not pretending it's a friendly little robot that's going to follow us around like R2D2, right? We're admitting that it's a tool. And what
mhm,
we're doing is we're trying to figure out the best shape of that tool to serve us. So it's kind of like if you were like, hey, look, you can bang on sticks with something and it drives it into the ground, right? And you pick up a rock, you pick up a log, you pick up
mhm.
your friend's head, and you start banging, you start
Hopefully not.
banging things into the ground, and then somebody comes up and goes like, "Well, hey, look at this," and you go, "What is that?" You go, "This is a hammer." It's a stick, and the heavy thing's on the end of the stick, and this is really the best shape of this tool. It's better than grabbing a rock to bang the stick into the ground, right? And that's kind of what we have with, I think that's where AI is we all are just picking it up and banging it up against things and thinking like, oh, this should work because it's kind of human like. But these folks are saying, no, we're going to put the time into understanding how this tool should be formed
Yeah.
so that it's as useful as possible. And to your point, now we have a hammer, and that hammer bangs things into the ground. It doesn't
Mhm,
cut things in half. It doesn't do anything else. It bangs things into the ground. If we want something that cuts in half, that tool would be shaped
We
different.
need a different tool.
You need a different
Would
tool.
you-
And that tool may be an AI tool, but it's a different tool.
Yeah.
So that's where that's where I really like this work. And then I think this exposure that Eric did here of the process and the thought process and all the
Mhm.
behind the scenes work that went into creating the right tool,
Mhm.
building the tool in the right shape. There's a lot of value in that, because I think that that's where a lot of organizations are. And AI aside, just trying to figure out how to do anything. And, I do a lot of work with the maturity models, because I'm on the um, working group creating the accessibility maturity model that's under the W3C. And that's what a lot of organizations are looking for that now. How do we understand our gaps? How do we understand what to do? How do we put this together? And this is kind of like a case study on how these folks did that. And not that it's going to completely apply to somebody else, but it's going to, it
Mhm.
exposes how that thought process went. And I think that that's just really, really valuable.
We need more people to show their work.
Yeah.
And
As
GitHub has
much as I
always been.
resisted that,
Yeah.
like especially with long division, I don't want to show my work. Because they do it on a calculator. That's why I didn't want to show my work.
Yeah. But I mean, it's GitHub, and they have
Yeah.
a history of open source and
This is what
being
GitHub
open.
is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
And
just showing
so,
you work
yeah, and so it's awesome that they're showing their work on this, because there's
in
so many
versions,
people
by
that
the way.
are talking about this, but we're not showing a lot of work.
Mhm. It's just showing the
Um,
work. That's a good way to
so,
phrase it. That's a good way to
so
phrase it. And that is what GitHub's all about. It's literally
yeah.
GitHub is showing your work version after version after version after version.
Mhm.
All right. Well, check out Eric's article. It's really, really interesting. Even if Justin got into the technical weeds here with it, I think you'll still find interest in Eric's article, because it talks a lot about that process.
Mhm.
And then certainly if they're valuable to you, those GitHub tools are very interesting. Now let's look at this structural workbook for AI accessible design systems that Anna E. Cook put together. And I have to admit that I did not. You went through and read this entire
Mhm.
book she put together, this
The workbook.
design systems books. I did not do that, and it's pretty extensive. So the this is kind of a how-to guide, right,
Mm.
for using AI in your design systems. Is that the simplest way to
Not
frame this
necessarily a
problem?
how-to guide, but it's one. She says this in the book, in the workbook, that it's around governance. How are you going to govern AI as it uh, and the implications it will have on your design system and the accessibility of your design system? So she's really kind of looking at it through that lens,
Mhm,
much in the same way like when you and I talk with customers about the maturity model.
mhm,
Kind of very similar. This is built out across 6 different um, questions, things like design bias, output ownership, user signals, ownership. Who's going to own the output of the from the LLM? Um, and it gets into a series of questions around each of those to essentially give yourself essentially score your organization and your approach, and then gives you um, some paths forward. But just the questions that you're alone that you're being asked, and every time that you might look at it and be like, "Oop, we're not doing that. Oop, we're not doing that." Like it helps you to. I always come back to like buying a home. Like when the first time you buy a home, you unless you knew a realtor, like you don't
mhm.
know what that process is going to be like. Even though a realtor is going to walk you through, you don't know what questions to ask, or what questions not to ask. Like when you're going through,
Right.
a home tour. Um, and so that's why I love playbooks like this, because they put all the questions out where you can read through them and you can actually evaluate yourself, your organization, whatever, go through, do that kind of self evaluation, but now you know the other questions that you should have been asking
the
yourself all along, and you can begin to formulate responses to those. How is my organization going to address these things?
So it's I mean, it's a way to uncover gaps in the process
Yeah.
that if you don't uncover them up front, you're in trouble. After you could be in some trouble after you've implemented,
Yeah,
right? Or
you
you
could
could be
be in
less
some.
efficient or whatever the case is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like, so you went through this whole guide here. Like, what is some of your favorite, or I would say, like, what are the outstanding things? I think, like, when we apply the maturity model, one of the things that I notice from a customer is when you ask a question and they're like, "Oh, right. That's why we hired you to do this, because we wouldn't have thought of that," right? Like, that's because, and then they always are like, "Well, we were thinking about that, and this is," so they kind of like do get some of those questions right, right? Because
Mhm.
everybody's sort of smart and thinks about those things, but there's always those gotcha. So what would you say were some of the things you read through this that you're like, I don't know that I would have thought of that before I picked up this guide?
Ooh, I thought you were gonna take that question in a slightly different way. Um,
Well, you can answer it in a slightly different way. Be like a politician, just answer the question the way you want to answer it and
oh,
don't get
that's a good
into the
point.
question.
And then I'll run for office, and
And then you run for
we're
office.
not going to go down that
I
rabbit
wish you
hole on
would.
Friday. Um,
I'd vote for you.
so kind of the two places, the two sections that I really liked were the first section around design biases, um, and just that, just the very pointed questions that help you to hopefully, putting that in air quotes, hopefully recognize that you may have made some assumptions in the creation of your design system that may or intentionally or unintentionally affect persons with disabilities. Um, and so that's
So
a
unintended consequences of
yes. Like,
decisions.
did you unintentionally introduce some design biases
Mhm.
that are going to exclude people?
That's really
And
cool.
here's
Okay.
some ways to think about that. But mostly, I also like that she included neurodivergency in there. Neurodivergency? Yeah, that's a word.
Neurodivergence. Yeah.
Um, and so that's included in there. Um, so I like that is up front. It's kind of like, the Bill of Rights, um, you know, the having oh, it's Friday. My brain just went away. It just went.
It's sort of a mantra. It's sort of a mantra. It informs sort of all the
It sets
other.
the stage for the rest of the document.
Yeah, I got you.
Like, um, and then, but I also, the one that I really liked also was output ownership. Because I believe on following through, and
Mm,
that you can't put these things out there and then just let them be. The like when I do work, like I don't know, probably every couple of weeks, I'm reviewing my agents files and my architecture files when I'm
right.
building something with Claude. Um, and so I'm constantly going back and reviewing those things, making sure, is there a better way to do this? Should I be doing something different? And so section 3 about output ownership, naming someone, not the AI team or the design team, but putting a name on paper of who is going to be responsible for going back through and reviewing these things. Um, Making sure that you're capturing the information, that you're logging what's being asked of the AI and what it's doing, making
Mm.
sure that there's an audit trail of that. Like, that's all
It goes.
great
It
stuff.
goes. It goes back to shaping the proper
Yeah.
tool and not just kind of let it run. And I love the term ownership, and I'm not so sure everybody thinks about that term. Ownership means I own something, right? This is mine, right? But
Mhm.
when you use it in this type of a context, it it means you own it and therefore are responsible for it. And are and you're responsible for it to an extreme, meaning you can't blame it on somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, you can't blame it on the AI.
Yeah.
There's an admission, I think, that going back to what we were talking about before, like AI as a tool, it is not perfect. You have to make sure that what it output is correct. And then going back to that mantra, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going back to that sort of baseline, setting the stage, you're the one who has to make sure that that AI didn't come up with consequences unintended, right, for people
Yeah.
with disabilities. So ownership is a really, um, in my opinion, is a really good output of this. Just that concept of a human needs to have ownership over the final output
Yeah.
in that extreme way. So cool. This is jump to the website. There's a little bit of information on the website, but then this is a Word document that you can download, which I really like, and I really like that format because it means that you can not just read the guide, but you can also kind of apply it and take it apart and put it into contexts that make sense for you and for your teams and all of that. So this is really I love the edge work like this. And I think if we had to, maybe that'll inform the title of this podcast, but there's all these overarching principles of accessibility that we all talk about. And then sometimes the real aha moments are in this edge work where somebody says, I'm going to take a look at this specific thing and think about how this should operate. I know these things are both AI, but that aside, that's
There's a lot of overlap.
that's avoiding those unintended consequences. That's all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah. No, there was a lot of overlap between these two, like the stuff with going on in GitHub and then this document. Yes, one's coding and one's design, but that the way that the way that I saw them kind of overlapping is around the policy, the not the policy,
policy
the
making.
process.
Yep.
And this is how we're going to build something. We're gonna think about accessibility when we're coding and we're building out agents to kind of watch our back and to help us make sure that we don't stumble. And then Anna's document is this is how, as an organization, we're going to watch out for the design side and make sure that we don't forget as we're applying AI to our designs, that we don't forget about accessibility and that we're we're staying up to date on it. So
How we're going to shape the tool, how we're going to narrow the tool's purpose, and how we're going to make sure we understand. We put safety settings on, and we also are going to train the people using the tool on how to use the tool safely.
Yeah.
It's a really it's like you're training people to be carpenters,
Yeah.
right? This is what the hammer does. This is what your
It's not just
impact
banging
driver
nails.
does. This is what the saws do. This is how you operate with them safely. This is the regulations. This is what our company says you need to do to be safe. Bum, bum, bum. I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead. You have
I was
something else.
just gonna say, and also too, for anyone that actually does pick up this playbook and use it, Anna is looking for feedback. She says so on her website and in the document. So this is one of those playbooks that I I'm I'm kind of looking for an excuse to be able to like work with a customer and utilize this. I just haven't gotten a chance to use it. Like I see the promise of it, and
Yeah.
um,
Well, and that's great because that means that she's going to continue to iterate and
hopefully,
improve based on the wider. It's like releasing a tool into beta or whatever. I mean, an app into
yeah,
beta or whatever. You're going to have a wide range of people helping improve it. Fantastic. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about, and this is where we're moving off and into a whole other area here, but this is the accessible medical diagnosis equipment rule to take effect this summer. And this is an HHS rule. So this is section 504 HHS. The article mentions Title II as well. But what's interesting about this is the application of it. So we think about digital accessibility all the time, right? We think, and then that moves into kiosks, or I like to refer to them as enclosed systems. Oh, except for the other day, we were in the Pittsburgh airport, and we had this great. I know you're like, what
I was like,
tangent
I
are you
was
just
not at the
jumping
Pittsburgh
off on?
airport.
Listen to this. This is cool. I guarantee. I promise I'll bring it back around to this to the accessible medical diagnosis equipment rule to take effect this summer article. but I wanted to. So we had breakfast in the airport. Great waiter that was helping us, that was working with us and everything. And I'm like, hey, can I just pay now? Do you know what he said to me? He said, yeah, hang on a second. Let me go get the kiosk. And he was referring to the payment system.
Hmm.
So I love the fact that in the general population, the term kiosk no longer means some big installed thing sitting in the middle of somewhere that you walk up to. We're starting to understand that kiosks are these handheld devices and enclosed systems. So enclosed systems, hardware, software, enclosed. I just punched my mic. Enclosed together. Right. I know, it looks like a little punching bag. I'm gonna hit every once in a while. So the this medical diagnostic equipment rule, this starts to look at not just the medical system. So the way that we think about it a lot is like, your patient portals or that registration device when a patient walks in to the lobby for their appointment, and here I am, and here's the additional information you need, and whatever, right? Like these are the things that we think of in the digital accessibility world. Certainly anything on their public facing website or any of that patient facing, tool, portal, application, the video, medical video tools, where you might have your appointment, all that kind of stuff, right? But this is starting to talk about the actual medical equipment, the stuff that once you get past all of those things we think about that the doctors are using, and the accessibility of that equipment. And I think one of the interesting things that comes out of this is like, how do you make an X-ray accessible? Right?
Well, yeah.
But these medical devices nowadays are large, I shouldn't say large, but they're kiosks. By definition of an enclosed system, they're kiosks. So it starts to raise the question, like for me, there was this immediate blurring of these lines between what we typically think of that needs to be accessible for the patient, and the questions. This caused me to ask more questions than it gave me answers. But the questions are, where are the lines? And when you start to think about accessibility, what needs to be accessible? So X-ray, right? Does the X-ray machine need to be accessible for the technician? Does the output need to be accessible to the patient? I just got an X-ray of my foot because I have a repeated use injury in my foot. So I'm hopefully healing.
Yeah, I read this more that it's more for the patients and less for. I didn't get a
No, I
chance
understand
to read the
that's
full
what the
rule. Yeah.
article is for, but that's what I'm saying is
Oh,
that.
yeah, you're thinking the next.
But if you had said X-ray machine to me before I read this article, I would have been like, well, yeah, we should make those accessible so that the techs can use them accessibly. So that we can so that if techs have disabilities, they can do an X-ray, right? But this article is now going, no, the X-ray machine needs to be accessible for the patient. And I think it's talking a lot about the physical accessibility of the X-ray machine, right? But it's an enclosed system. There's hardware, software components to all of this stuff. So it starts to open up that question of how do you look at these things from that standpoint of accessibility?
Yeah. What's interesting, some of the examples they give in the article that we read, one of it's I'm going to go off topic a little bit here, but one of the exam things is, exam tables must be
Why do you
height
go off topic all
adjustable.
the time? I never go off topic. Why do you go off topic? Are you going to talk about a waiter in a Pittsburgh airport?
No.
Okay.
There's like exam tables must be height adjustable, and there's things there. Scales must be wheelchair accessible. And the first thing that popped into my head was about a month ago, I took our dog to the vet, and it used to be we would walk in. The first thing that they did was they wanted to weigh her, and they would have her hop up on this little scale, and they would weigh her, and it was always tricky to get her to stay, and then they would take us back to a room. This time they took us just straight back to a room, and she walked in, and the exam table. They lowered the exam table down. She stepped up. We got her up, put her up on it. It weighed her, gave her that, and then they raised it back up.
Mm.
And I was just like, whoa, that's like, you've got now this one kind of piece. Now it's more
Right.
moving parts, more opportunity for breakage, that sort of thing, and maintenance. But it's neat that this one unit is now serving as both an exam table, weight, or weight, a scale, but it's also adjustable so that for bigger dogs, littler dogs, like you can adjust it for whatever the vet needs to look at. And so when I was looking at these technical requirements, I was like, ooh, I wonder if,
Right.
newer hospitals, because you can't just run out and buy a new one of those things to replace them. But is something like that available? Like where they're building the scales into an exam table, or there's something that allows for, you know, for that reuse between
Mm.
these types of tools.
It's actually a really interesting thought. Like, if you think about a veterinary practice versus a medical practice for people, there's a lot of accommodation and variation in a veterinary practice because, and they say it's hard to be a vet, right? Because
Mhm.
they're dealing with different types of organisms where a doctor is dealing with humans, right?
Yeah.
Um, but because of that, their equipment is more adaptable. And so it's an interesting thought exercise of like, what could we learn about adapting equipment for humans, particularly with this HHS rule and accessibility? What could we learn about adapting equipment for humans from veterinary practices and their long practice of having to adapt their tools to varying organisms, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you, if you need to take the temperature of a cat, a dog, a snake, a horse, a pig, right? A sheep, what I mean, if you need to take care of a horse, you need to get in your car. If you need to take care of a dog, the dog's going to come to you. I mean, just simple things like that start like that. So now my piece of equipment needs to work well inside of my office, but I also need that or another piece of equipment that I can take to the farm.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, it starts that basic, but now, I can I can measure the temperature of a horse one way, but I probably can't do that for a gerbil, right? Like it,
Probably
so
very different instruments.
yeah. And so it's not to say that the accommodations that maybe we can't steal a whole lot from the specific solutions, but going back to the other two articles that we talked about, right? It is
Yeah.
about the process in which these things are looked at and considered and everything like that. It would be interesting. You almost want to take a vet and be like, you innovated a lot in your practice.
Hmm.
Can you talk to this group of people with disabilities and about their needs and then consider how we might adapt our equipment to it. So, I mean, I'm just thinking about that. I just think that bringing up a vet was a really interesting,
Yeah.
and seeing what they've done is really interesting. But I think what this article made me, think about is that blurring of those lines. So I wonder in the future how these medical devices that are being used inside of a medical practice by doctors and nurses and all sorts of medical practitioners. I think more and more there's going to be patient facing aspects of those that aren't just physical but are also digital.
Hmm.
I don't know why, but I think of it like if I step up on a scale at my doctor's office, I want to know what the scale said. I want to be
I
able
hate
to
it when
look.
they have it in kilograms.
Well, but I can look at the scale,
Yeah.
right? I have vision, so I can look at that scale and I can go, oh, look, I'm 165 pounds.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, that's good to know because now I know my scale at home is accurate and blah, whatever. I don't know why.
Hmm.
I just want to know, and I have the right to know, right? But if a blind person steps up on a scale, I'm sure that the technician would be perfectly happy to tell them.
Hmm.
But what's the equivalent? What's the accommodation so that that blind person can, let's assume that they don't have that human there to help them, right? Because
Hmm.
it's equivalent experience.
Yeah.
What's the equivalent? Just on something as simple as a scale.
Yeah. You would
So
need it back
it just
because
makes me think about.
you wouldn't want it to speak to you and
Mhm.
broadcast your weight to the, anyone's
Yeah, right.
nearby.
If there's other people around, it's a HIPAA
Yeah.
violation if the thing starts talking. Maybe it's even a HIPAA violation if I can look at it and know what it says. But now when a technician blurts it out, maybe I don't want that as a blind person. I want the ability to understand it. So maybe I want to plug my headphones into the scale. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm speculating, but and then also I think that when we look at like Waymos and stuff and cars that are becoming autonomous, like this age of autonomy in terms of equipment. So equipment that used to be have the need to be driven by a person now doesn't, or we're
Mhm.
starting to move more and more towards that. So when I walk into the clinic 10 years from now, am I going to be sort of escorted around by a human being who's going to strap a cuff on me and stick a thermometer in my mouth or, hip, do whatever all that stuff that happens and all a human being is like doing that? Or am I going to walk into a room and sit at some version of that table that you talked about that your dog stepped up on, and that table's going to take my weight and a cuff's going to come around and take my blood pressure and something in the room's going to know my temperature and maybe it's going to ask me questions and I answer the questions, and so there's going to be is there going to be an interaction outside of that human interaction that we have now in the
Mhm.
future? And if so, these rules,
Mhm.
as they should, are going to require them be accessible. So anyways, it just that's what I found interesting. That's why I wanted to bring up this article, is because I think that we need to start to really think outside the box. I think the digital world and the physical world and the world of human beings is all collapsing in together to become something different.
Hopefully not a black hole.
That that would be terrible. Do you think it's one day we all get sucked into a black hole? Is that what you're saying?
No, I've just been reading too much.
I'm going to cancel my AI accounts right now. Yeah, I don't hope it doesn't. Yeah. Hope the wave packets don't collapse into a black hole.
Yeah.
You've been reading Stephen Hawking lately. Is that what's going
No,
on?
that was Cormac McCarthy.
Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe it's Brian Greene. I don't know.
Mm. Are we to the
I'm
point
not
yet
going to
where
listen to
we
the
get
show
to
now.
take
You guys look that stuff up. All
Are we
right.
to the point yet where we're going to take bets on whether or not this ruling will be pushed? Or is that too apropos?
100% it will. This is that folded up envelope.
Mm-hmm.
If it's
I'm going to go make some
gotta,
polymarket.
and I was confused a little bit about the ruling. It looks like it's all 504 HHS, but it looks like it's a separate. And they, for some reason, they mentioned Title II in here, but it doesn't look like they're different.
Yeah.
It's different rulemaking, I think.
Probably a
But
different rulemaking for physical devices, just like we have um the
well,
ADA and the ABA and
right, and so July 8th, 2026, and August 9th, 2026. Practices must comply by July 8th, 2026. The compliance deadline for government entities is August 9th, 2026. So given that, we're looking at probably sometime at the end of July, beginning of August. My prediction would be that the government one would be pushed, and then end of June, beginning of July, the compliance deadline for practices. That would be, I'm going to fold up my prediction, put it in an envelope, seal it up, and that's what I would say. And that's based on HHS following the HHS rule, following what the Title II rule did earlier. And if
following what
you
the
all are not like,
did.
what are these guys talking about? You can jump back a couple of episodes. We've got some blog articles. You can Google it. There's a lot of information out on these rules being extended. And we won't talk about how we feel about it. You can go to previous episodes of this podcast where we go in depth and talk about those things. How's that? 44 minutes and 8 seconds. We done?
You're done.
We
Call
done. We done did it. All right. Well, thanks, man.
Yeah. Always a
Thanks for
pleasure.
thanks for driving the technical side of this one. I appreciate that,
Yeah.
because I was like, I'm not going to get on and start talking about all that stuff because I don't have.
Good articles this week.
You have the right brain for it.
I wish it wasn't Friday afternoon because how did I mess up First Amendment?
I never thought I'd hear you utter the phrase, I wished it wasn't Friday afternoon.
Well, good point.
On that note, I hope you have a good weekend. Now that we have broken down accessibility for you, we hope you go forth and keep it accessible.
Thank you for listening to the Accessibility Breakdown by Inclusion Impact Accessibility.